All right, let's just dive right in. Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're taking an incredibly fascinating look at a powerful piece of source material that tackles the psychology of breakups, and it does it through the really grounding lens of ancient Stoic philosophy. Now, if you've ever experienced the end of a relationship, or honestly, any major interpersonal loss, you know that immediate, almost desperate pull to try and just fix things. Well, the source we're unpacking today makes a huge claim. It argues that this exact instinct is actually the very thing that destroys your self-respect. So today we're breaking down exactly why begging completely backfires and how shifting into a Stoic mindset can fundamentally transform your entire response to loss.
So the source material actually opens up with this massive provocation. I really want you to just sit with this for a second. When you beg someone to stay, what exactly do you think you're winning? It forces a total shift in perspective, doesn't it? Because in that chaotic moment right after things fall apart, the natural instinct is to plead, to promise you'll change, to literally beg the other person not to walk out the door. But the author challenges us to look really closely at the reality of that outcome. Let's say it seemingly works. What have you actually achieved? This perfectly sets the stage for the core argument here, that desperate pleading is a losing game right from the very start.
And well, that brings us straight to the core philosophical framework of today's explainer, choosing dignity over desperation. The source draws heavily on Stoic principles, specifically this incredibly powerful idea that unconditional self-worth always, and I mean always, beats external validation. The Stoic mind completely understands that begging never wins you anything actually worth having. In fact, the analysis argues that the exact moment you beg, you lose the one thing that truly matters, your dignity. And ironically enough, along with that loss of dignity goes the very quality that made you worth wanting in the first place. But to really grasp how to shift into this mindset, we first need to look at the trap we all just naturally fall into. All right, moving into section 1, the expectation to beg, breaking the unspoken script.
What's super fascinating here is how the author describes the whole environment of a breakup. They call it the script or the frame. It's basically this incredibly heavy, unspoken, societal, and honestly sometimes deeply personal expectation just hanging in the air. We are practically conditioned from birth to believe that pleading, chasing, and having a total emotional breakdown are the natural, devoted responses to someone leaving. We're taught that fighting desperately for someone somehow proves how much we care about them. But the source stresses that whether the other person consciously expects you to grovel, or if it's just this assumption baked into our culture, it doesn't even matter. What matters is recognizing that this script exists in the first place. Because, as the Stoics teach us, if you don't see the script, you're just going to act on autopilot. Naming it literally takes away its automatic power and gives you back the freedom to choose your response. And once we step out of that autopilot, we can start looking at the cold, hard logic of the situation. Which leads us to section 2, why pleading always backfires, the illusion of control. So here's a really crucial practical point from the source. It draws this stark contrast. On one side, you've got hollow obligation. On the other, genuine desire. It's a really tough realization. But you simply cannot beg someone into genuinely wanting you. Neediness and desperation are just fundamentally repellent. I mean, even in the super rare case where pleading actually works and the person agrees to stick around, what have you really won? You've won a highly reluctant staying based on guilt, maybe pity, or just sheer discomfort. That is hollow obligation. But what you actually want, what we all want, is genuine desire, attraction and respects that are freely given. The source's argument is completely airtight here. You can never beg your way into being genuinely wanted. You can only beg your way into being tolerated. But you know, the failure of the tactic isn't even the worst part. The real tragedy is what happens to you internally. And that brings us to section 3, the cost to your dignity, the self-inflicted wound. The absolute deepest tragedy of begging is captured so perfectly in this Stoic quote. It says, "It is better to lose everything external than to lose your own integrity." Wow. I mean, the source is emphasizing that every single time you beg, you're fundamentally damaging yourself. You're basically teaching your own mind that your worth is negotiable, that it's conditional, and that you're totally willing to abandon yourself just for a scrap of affection. That internal corrosion of self-respect, that is the absolute deepest cost of begging. You aren't just losing the relationship, you are actively trading your integrity for a desperate gamble that, as we literally just saw, was never going to work anyway. Now, this next part of the source material addresses a very modern and honestly very subtle variation of this exact problem. Let's look at section 4, the fake dignity trap, manipulation in disguise. This introduces a wildly modern, incredibly seductive trap discussed in the text, using the mere appearance of Stoic silence as a reverse psychology trick. If you're refusing to plead just to make the other person chase you, or if you're totally fixated on their reaction to your silence, secretly hoping your distance forces them to respond, well, you haven't actually kept your dignity at all. The source argues that this calculated strategic silence is really just a much more sophisticated, disguised form of begging. It carries the exact same desperate energy, it's just wearing a slightly nicer mask. To really drive this concept home, the author offers this phenomenal litmus test comparing disguised begging to genuine dignity. Just ask yourself, if I knew with absolutely 100% certainty that keeping my dignity would never bring them back, would never make them want me, and would literally never affect them at all, would I still keep it? If the answer is no, you're just putting on a performance. Genuine dignity is held unconditionally for your own self-respect, completely and totally regardless of the other person's reaction. And all of this leads right into a brilliant paradox highlighted by the source. It goes like this. Self-respect is highly magnetic, but its power evaporates the instant it becomes a calculated performance. It's a genuine truth that calm, dignified acceptance is vastly more attractive than desperate pleading. A person who maintains their composure demonstrates this undeniable security and strength. But, and this is a massive but, the moment you hold your dignity specifically to be attractive, it immediately stops working. The attractiveness of self-respect absolutely must be a natural byproduct, never the actual goal itself. So, if we aren't begging and we aren't faking silence to manipulate an outcome, what do we actually do? Well, this brings us to the ultimate solution in the source material. Section 5, the real Stoic comeback, reclaiming your energy. So, how do we actually pull this off? The philosophy breaks it down into 3 really actionable steps. Step 1, refuse the frame. Calmly, without any drama or spite, you just decline to play the role of the desperate, pleading ex. Step 2, keep your dignity. You accept the situation with grace, maintaining your absolute composure. And finally, step 3, which is probably the most crucial, turn toward yourself. The author explains that when you don't waste your energy on chasing someone else, you have this massive amount of reclaimed energy. The true Stoic comeback is taking all of that energy and pouring it entirely into your own growth, your mind, your body, and your purpose. Because the source makes it totally wonderfully clear, there is ultimately only one primary goal here: to become a person of undeniable internal value who never ever has to beg for anything again. The comeback isn't about getting the other person back at all, it's about getting yourself back. It's about using the very real pain of the ending as the raw material to build yourself into a genuinely stronger, completely unbroken individual. As we wrap up this explainer today, I really want to leave you with one final vital question, something to just chew on for a bit. Is your self-worth conditionally tied to someone else's choice, or is it yours, unconditionally? The person who never begs has freed themselves entirely, because their dignity simply isn't for sale at any price. They're whole, they're unbroken, and they're secure. It's just an incredibly powerful framework for navigating loss, and absolutely something we can all deeply reflect on the very next time we feel that urge to chase what is already walking away.